The Space Shuttle Columbia, designated OV-102, was the veteran of the fleet. It roared off the pad for STS-107, its 28th mission. Aboard was an international crew of 7 researchers, including Ilan Ramon, a veteran pilot who made history as the first Israeli in space. 81 seconds into the climb, a suitcase-sized block of polyurethane foam tore away from the external fuel tank's left bipod ramp. Traveling at a high relative velocity, the foam slammed into Columbia's left wing. The impact punched a hole up to 25 centimeters wide through the leading edge's thermal shield. Columbia had suffered a fatal wound before it even reached orbit. For the next 16 days, the crew would conduct 80 different experiments, entirely unaware that their return to Earth was already impossible. NASA's mission management team spotted the foam strike on launch footage the very next day. They chose to categorize it as a maintenance issue rather than a safety emergency. This was the result of a psychological phenomenon called the normalization of deviance. Historical data showed that foam had fallen off the external tank in over 80% of all previous missions. Because these earlier flights returned safely, management stopped seeing the debris as a critical threat, eventually accepting it as a routine part of the launch. Engineers on the ground did not share that optimism. Recognizing the potential for a breach, they submitted 3 separate urgent requests for the Department of Defense to photograph the wing using spy satellites. NASA's leadership explicitly denied every request, actively intervening to prevent the military from providing visual confirmation of the damage. This was later identified as engineering by view graphs. Management relied on a simulation tool called Crater, which was designed for tiny projectiles, to model the massive foam impact. They compressed complex thermodynamic uncertainties into simplified PowerPoint slides that labeled the damage as cosmetic. The foam block caused the physical breach, but an organizational culture that silenced its own engineers ensured the hole remained hidden until it was too late. On February 1, 2003, Columbia began its descent into the atmosphere. At this stage, the laws of physics are indifferent to management's optimism. The wing's leading edge is lined with reinforced carbon-carbon panels. These are designed to withstand the 1600 degrees Celsius friction generated during re-entry. The hole in panel 8 allowed superheated plasma to flood directly into the wing's internal cavity, bypassing the thermal shield entirely. Telemetry recorded on the shuttle's data recorder shows the exact sequence of the collapse. At 4 minutes and 30 seconds after atmospheric entry, temperature sensors spiked. 8 minutes later, those sensors were flatlining as the wiring was incinerated. The wing's internal aluminum frame was only rated for 180 degrees. Under the onslaught of the plasma, the metal beams literally melted, and the structural integrity of the wing evaporated. Aerodynamic drag caught the warped wing, pulling the shuttle into an uncontrollable spin. At Mach 18, the airframe violently disintegrated over the state of Texas. In that moment, the organizational denial maintained for 16 days met the inescapable reality of thermodynamics. The search for answers required a massive logistical effort on the ground, covering a 2.3 million-acre debris field. 16,000 personnel from federal agencies and local volunteers spent over 1 million work hours, recovering 84,000 fragments of the shuttle from woods, swamps, and reservoirs. Investigators brought the wreckage to a hangar at the Kennedy Space Center. They used a 1-to-1 scale grid on the floor to physically reassemble the orbiter's remains piece by piece. Forensic analysis of the debris revealed melted aluminum deposited directly onto the recovered carbon panels. This provided the smoking gun, physical proof that the wing's interior had been exposed to plasma. The painstaking reconstruction of the wreckage definitively validated the warnings that management had dismissed during the mission. The disaster carried the heavy human cost. Among the debris, searchers recovered 37 pages of Ilan Ramon's personal diary, miraculously preserved after falling 60 kilometers to the Texas floor. The Ramon family's tragedy extended through generations. Ilan's son, Asaf, followed his father's footsteps to become a top-ranking fighter pilot, but he was killed in a training flight just 6 years after his father's death. The Columbia Accident Investigation Board mandated sweeping reforms. future shuttle missions included mandatory hull inspections and the development of kits to repair thermal tiles while in orbit. But the board's most significant findings were about communication. They concluded that rigid hierarchies and suppressed warnings are as dangerous to a spacecraft as any physical breach in the hull. Columbia stands as a permanent reminder that in high-stakes environments, the human tendency to normalize deviance can be as lethal as any mechanical failure.